Hello, everybody. Um, I am recording this a little bit after the Vietnam video. I really apologize for the quality of that video. I think something was going on with my internet, obviously. So hopefully this looks better. It looks better, at least from the video quality. I could see from the lower right window. So because I could see it tearing and kind of freeze framing during the last video. So I apologize about that. I know it made it difficult to answer the questions. Again, I expect you to just do the best you can. So we're going to be talking about the Cold War in Latin America. It should be a fairly short video compared to Vietnam. That was one of the reasons why I didn't re-record Vietnam. I might do it again later, but it took so long to do it. I got discouraged after all the work I put into it. So um, but maybe I'll put it up again later. I don't think you'll watch it again though. So, but you can. I mean, whenever I finish it, I'll probably take it down and put up a new one on my YouTube channel. At least if you want to watch it, I have to do it for my AP kids too. So, okay, what are we getting to with here with Latin America? Okay, big picture. Um, Remember the Cold War is a battle of the United States and the Soviet Union for control of the planet. Both countries want to set up governments that are friendly to either the United States or the Soviet Union. Um, Obviously, the Soviet Union wants to create communist governments around the world, and the United States wants to create governments that are anti-communist. I wouldn't say democracies because, as I've told you during the Cold War, we don't we don't need countries to be democracies. Okay, I mean, like, we're gonna support El Salvador. El Salvador is not a democracy. We're gonna support Egypt. We're gonna support a lot of countries um, during the Cold War that are not democracies, but they're anti-communist, and that's enough for us. Okay, um, one of the tragedies of the Cold War is that we will support people that do questionable things. I'm trying to figure out the best way to word that. Um, Not all of the people we support will be look, they're not going to be choir boys. These aren't angels. And you could build the argument that in dirty wars, all there are dirty people. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's difficult to keep your hands clean when you're digging into the Cold War. And maybe that's worth a classroom debate. Maybe that'll be our debate for next week. We'll see. But this will be an example of that. When we get into the Cold War in Latin America, that is perhaps the dirtiest that the Cold War would get. Some people think so, at least. But big picture here, we are supporting anti-communist governments. So if a government's anti-communist and is fighting communist rebels, we will support the government. If a government is a communist government, as in the case of Nicaragua, we will find anti-communist rebels and we will support them. Okay, so if you want to know who we're supporting during the Cold War, we're supporting anybody who is anti-communist. Okay, we're only going to talk about two countries. There's probably other countries we could mention too. We could talk about Chile and Arbenz. CIA overthrew that guy. Probably be a good place to talk about. It's not in the notes here. I won't require you to know it for the test um, that we're going to have. But I will expect you to know two cases in particular: El Salvador and Nicaragua. Okay, but guys, understand this. We are involved in many countries in Latin America, not just Nicaragua, not just El Salvador. We're involved in anti communist operations all over South and Central America, whether it's Guatemala, Honduras, Chile, all over. So don't think that Nicaragua and El Salvador are the only examples. I'm just only expecting you to know two. Okay, so let's get into them now because I don't want this to be too long of a video. I'm trying to keep that to a minimum today. Let me see if I can move the screen down a little bit. Um, okay, maybe shrink that a little bit. Okay. Anyways, so what are we looking at here? Nicaragua. I wonder if I have a map. So yeah, Nicaragua's here, and I don't think I have a bigger map. So probably been nice to be able to zoom out to Google Maps and show you. But Nicaragua is here. It's in between Honduras and Costa Rica. If you, in case you don't know where this is, Mexico is up here in the north. Nicaragua ends up having a communist government called the Sandinistas. Okay, over here. And this happens in 1979. The Sandinistas take control of Nicaragua. And look, the communists have a foothold in Latin America. Now, this isn't the first communist government that we've seen in the Western Hemisphere in the Americas, whether it's Latin America, South America. We look. Cuba was the first. Okay, so Cuba's already gone communist. The fear is that what we're looking at here is domino theory, and we've talked about domino theory, guys. If Cuba goes communist, then Nicaragua goes communist, and that seems to be the case. But our fear is if Nicaragua goes communist, it won't just be Nicaragua. There's there's communist guerrillas, not governments. There's communist guerrillas in El Salvador. There's communist government, or I keep saying governments, guerrillas in Guatemala. There's communist guerrillas and rebels in Honduras. So what you're looking at is domino theory in action. So the feeling is we have to overthrow the government in Nicaragua. We got to get rid of these communists. Now, the theory is called rollback, by the way. Rollback, that if a communist if there's a government that goes communist, well, we could roll it back. We could overthrow that government and wipe the slate clean, and bam, communist gone. We've had some success with that and some failures, okay, during the Cold War. But this is an example of rollback policy. We're not trying to contain communism in Nicaragua, which means isolate it, make sure it doesn't spread. We're trying to roll back the government of Nicaragua, which means those communists got to go. They got to go, right? So we find the way to get rid of a communist government is you find rebels in that country that are anti-communist and they want to overthrow the government. You send the CIA in there, you train those guys, you equip them, you give them money, and you tell them start going to war. Start figuring this out. And the people we train, and you'll need to know this, are the Contras. These are anti-communist fighters in Nicaragua. They want to overthrow the communist government in Nicaragua. So here are some examples of what the Contras. And guys, this is something else you're going to have to understand about this Cold War. There's going to be children fighting. Okay, both sides. You're going to see children, 12, 13 years old, fighting in these battles. It's understood this is part of warfare. It happens a lot in Latin America. It's going to happen some in Africa, but it's not unheard of. It's the reality. It's the way it is. Okay, and it's not just going to be children. This is a picture of Contra fighters too. Some of them are going to be women. And these girls look like they're maybe 17, 18 years old. These are Contras fighting in Nicaragua. Okay, so let me tell you what starts happening. The CIA starts equipping these guys, starts training them, and then starts telling them, look, you have to start attacking soft targets. Well, what does soft targets mean? Well, you start assassinating people. Instead of going after the army, you go after government officials. We start assassinating, government leaders. We start assassinating people that support government programs. Sometimes, by the way, that means supporting doctors, not supporting, killing. Big difference there, big difference. Sometimes that means assassinating doctors. Sometimes that means assassinating lawyers. Sometimes that means assassinating nurses. Sometimes that means blowing up pipelines. The idea is to hit the government where they're weak, where they can't fight back, and to cause damage, confusion, to undermine the government, to reduce its effectiveness. Hopefully, the people be so unhappy that the people start to want to overthrow the government. The problem is that um, it looks bad when you kill doctors. It looks bad when you kill nurses. It looks bad when you have 12-year-old, children fighting. You know, we start hearing about how the Contras were killing people. And I remember, man, I was in high school when this was going on. And I remember people trying to raise money for the Contras, kill a communist, you know, donate $1, kill a communist. I remember that kind of stuff, and then we started hearing, Congress starts hearing these stories about what's happening in Nicaragua. And they get, well, they're shocked because this looks bad. I mean, aren't we supposed to be the good guys? And do good guys, murder doctors in the middle of the night? Do 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 the good guys blow up, bombs in villages and kill the village leader and anybody who's sympathetic to the government? I mean, Congress is embarrassed by what's happened in Nicaragua, and they tell President Reagan, and this is President Reagan, he had a great smile. He was governor of California at one time. Reagan was a hardcore anti-communist. Hardcore. This guy is the ultimate Cold Warrior. You guys have to understand some things about President Reagan. So this is my way of knowing when I should ask some questions. So I'll put that up there. So when I flip through it, look, President Reagan was built for the Cold War. He hated communists. He calls communism evil. Says communism is the greatest source of evil on the planet. Makes it very clear, I want communism gone. I don't want to be friends with communists. I don't want to be friendly with communists. I want them gone. And so he's not joking. I mean, Reagan's a man of his word. The funny thing is, he is going to be friends with communists. Strangely enough. Strange how things work out. There's going to come a time where he and, Ronald Reagan and the leader of the Soviet Union will, I think, become honestly close with one another. You just can't. It's a weird world. You don't know how things are going to work out sometimes. You just don't know. We'll talk more about that when we get to the end of the Cold War. It's weird how the whole thing comes down. Life can be unpredictable. But anyways, back to our story. So Ronald Reagan, look, he wants the communists gone. Congress just told him, you can't fund the communists. You can't give them money. You can't have the CIA system. Look, Reagan is not interested in stopping. Okay, Reagan goes out and finds money from other sources, from people making donations from other countries. He gets together this money, and then he gives it to the country of Iran to buy weapons. Now, for me, this is where you guys have to be able to stop, hold that note, just put a bookmark in the story right here, okay? Put a bookmark in the story because we're going to come back. But I have to go off on a road a little bit, okay? Because I have to tell you about Iran because you don't understand what's going on in Iran. We haven't talked about it. So now I have to explain some things about Iran. Okay? Iran is in the Middle East. Now, this is an old map of the Middle East, but it's good enough for our purposes. It shows Iran. Google Maps probably would have been better to show you. Maybe I should have opened up a Google map. tab. Yeah, that's probably easier. So let's open up maps, and then I could show you where, first of all, Nicaragua is, and then I could show you where Iran is. Okay, because the two countries don't have, you wouldn't think, much to do with each other at all. First of all, let me show you Nicaragua, so you have an idea of what we're talking about. All right, pause while we wait for this to load. Here we go. Now, this is Nicaragua. Okay, ooh, waterfall. Let's go over there. Check it out, guys. Probably a lot of mosquitoes. All right. Now, let's zoom it out. Now you have an idea where Nicaragua is. Okay. Here's Nicaragua. Here's the United States. That's Mexico. Okay. Now let's go over to Iran. Iran is way over here in the Middle East. Okay. Here's Iran. Here's some of the places I've been in the Middle East, by the way. But this is Iran. Now, what's going on in Iran? Why do we have to talk about Iran? Well, there are some things happening in Iran. This happened actually before Reagan. See, this is a Shah Pahlavi, and he ran Iran for a while. During the 70s, he ran Iran. That was his wife. I think her name was Reza, but I forget. But anyways, Iran, underneath the Shah, was a modern Muslim country. It was in the Middle East, but it had European influences. Kids dressed in kind of European styles. They had some of Western influence. They had, universities and Western, styled hospitals. It was an advanced country that was leaning to the West. It was the Middle East is a weird thing because you have in some cases very how should I word this, fundamental kind of strict Muslim um, societies that have this interpretation of the Quran that says you have to dress a certain way, you have to act a certain way, there's certain roles. And then you have some countries where they have looser interpretations. Like women could show their hair. Like you could see this woman's wearing, the Shah. You don't understand why this is an important photo. But this woman's wearing makeup. His wife's wearing makeup. And she shows her hair. And in the Middle East, that's not always the case. There are some countries where you will see the majority of women covering their hair or not showing their face. So it's certainly not makeup. But this is examples. I'm showing you some pictures of Iranian life. This is the Shah wearing a tuxedo, and you could see this kind of a Western style party. So Iran had kind of been this crossroads between the West and the East, between Europe and the United States and more traditional Middle Eastern society. I think this is and guys, Iran was that way. You see Iranian college kids I think if you went to the United States, you wouldn't see a whole lot of difference between them. They dress, similar. They have, not remarkably different lifestyles. Iran was a modern kind of forward-looking society, certainly adopting Western ideas, trying to take religion and separate to whatever extent they could. It was difficult in Iran, but trying to separate religion from the government, that was always an issue. There are some guys you have to understand. In the Middle East, there are a lot of people who don't believe that the government should be separated from religion. Okay, there are a lot of people that believe that. But underneath the Shah, you had this modern, Iran that was kind of stepping those directions. You're going to see universities where kids are receiving, Western style education, and the Shah thought that this is the best way forward for Iran. The problem is, and here's some like more examples. I mean, guys, this is like I think it's a mini skirt in the 1960s. These girls are showing their legs. If when I show you how women dress in Iran later, you will understand why this is remarkable. But this is the thing. There are people in Iran that don't want this. There are people in Iran that believe the Western influence are destroying the culture. They believe that the Shah divorcing the government from religion is a sin. They think that he is turning his back on religion. He's turning his back on Islam. They believe he's making a serious mistake, and they hate him for it. There are numerous assassination attempts on the Shah. Um, but I like showing these examples of Iranian society because you get an idea of Iran and what Iran was. It's different today. Maybe not as much as you think. But these are kids, dancing. Which guys, I've seen videos in Iran of people dancing and they got in trouble for it. They were arrested, because they were dancing on top of a rooftop, and they had to apologize to the country for dancing on top of a rooftop. Okay, and oh man. And this is another thing, guys. The Shah banned the hijab. Now, what is a hijab? Let me show you what a hijab is. This is a hijab. Um, this is how women are supposed to, dress in Iran today. Not everybody does, not everybody, but it's not uncommon. But the Shah actually outlawed that. This was part of his what we call secularism. Okay, secularism means that, or secular means you're dividing religion from the government. Those two are separate, right? It's like oil and vinegar. It's what we have in the United States. Our education is secular. Our government is supposed to be secular. Um, in a lot of Middle Eastern societies, religion and government, religion and education, they're one. Okay, what the Shah was trying to do is separate those two in Iran. Okay, it's probably a good time to ask questions about. That means I'm going to ask a question coming up. So anyways, look, I mean, this girl, that doesn't look like to you guys like she's, showing a lot, but for Iranian society, that's showing a lot. Okay, that's showing a lot. So I love these old photos of Iran. But look, there are people in Iran that hate this. They hate this. They hate these changes. They hate the shift. They hate the direction Iran's going. And they want to go back to a traditional fundamentalist society where religion and the government are one, where the government laws are based on, the laws of the Quran, Sharia law, and that's what it's called. And by the way, they hate the United States because they know that one of the reasons. I mean, let's be honest. The only reason the Shah is in power is because the United States wants him there. The United States supports the Shah. The United States, look, he's our boy. Okay, he's our boy. Um, but the alternative is this guy. Now, it's worth noting at this point that the Shah is a brutal dictator. Okay, so he's not a democracy. Look, we like him, but we don't like him because he's a choir boy. We like him because he's number one anti-communist, and he's also anti-fundamentalist, meaning he will not turn Iran into something like what this guy wants. So we support him. And guys, we support him even though he does some horrible things. What the Shah does with people that disagree with him, he runs a brutal secret police program. Like he kills, murders, tortures his political opponents, people that criticize his government, protesters in the street. These people sometimes disappear. They reappear maybe with broken bones. They go back to their families, a broken human being. Sometimes they don't come back to their families at all. Sometimes these people, you find them face down floating in a river. So, look, the Shah, this guy runs a brutal government. It may be reaching towards a more modern Iran, but man, he's ruling that country with an iron fist, and he crushes. There is no free speech, not if you're criticizing the Shah, and you're, if you get on the wrong side of the Shah, you're looking at getting tortured or imprisoned or both, killed, possibly. Um, Problem is, there's enough people that want to overthrow the Shah, that there's a revolution and they pull it off. They overthrow the Shah. They they get rid of him. It's led by this guy, the Ayatollah Khomeini. By the way, Ayatollah is not his first name. Um, Ayatollah means religious leader. Okay, so and his name was Khomeini. I think it's his last name. Um, But yeah, he was the one that led the revolution, and he promises, "I'm going to take Iran back to a traditional, Islamic society, where women dress the way they're supposed to dress, and we bring back religious laws." Um, but guys, I'm telling you, he's got supporters. He's got martyrs in the thousands. Now, where are we at in the story here? Okay. So there's a revolution in Iran. What's this got to do with Nicaragua? Well, nothing yet. You have to understand how the United States gets involved here. Okay. Look, we've been supporting this guy's enemy for a long time. We've been supporting the Shah. And the Ayatollah Khomeini knows that. His supporters know that. And they hate the United States for it. They hate the United States for supporting a brutal dictator that murders his own people. And this is going to be a problem in a lot of countries in the Middle East, guys. We support a lot of brutal dictators that murder their own people, that torture their own people, that imprison people for speaking out against a government. We're going to support a lot of people like that. And it's going to cost us. Okay? It is going to, there's a saying, the chickens will come home to roost. Right? They're going to come home. And look, our support for dictators, it's going to come back and it's going to bite us in the ass. Okay? And this is going to be, if you want to know why countries hate the United States in the Middle East, why some countries in the Middle East hate the United States, at least our government, if not our people, um, it's because we've supported governments that are brutal dictators that have murdered their own people. And the United States has meddled in the Middle East for a long time, since the end of World War II. Okay, heavily. So, anyways, they kick out the Shah. He flees, and he's got cancer. He comes to the United States for treatment. And just so you guys know, get some water here. They wanted the Shah back in Iran. They want to put him on trial and they want to execute him. But the Shah comes to, well, we let him in the United States. And when we let him into the United States, the Ayatollah Khomeini and his followers, they freak out. And they do something you're not supposed to do. They attack the American embassy in Iran. Now, let me tell you what embassies are, guys, because you don't know the embassies and you don't know the rules. So now I got kind of two plates spinning in the air. Okay, don't forget about Nicaragua. Nicaragua's over here. But I'm also spinning this revolution thing going on in Iran. But now I have to explain to you about embassies. So I'm asking you to kind of, practice some, memory here. Okay. Embassies are when, look, countries that have relationships with each other, when they talk with each other, they have embassies in each other's countries. So we have embassies in every country we talk to. We have embassies in Mexico. We have embassies in, France, Spain, but Belgium, Britain, Germany. We have them everywhere. Okay, China. If we're speaking with a country, we have an embassy in the country. Well, I wouldn't use the word speaking. If we have diplomatic relations with that country, then we have embassies in the country. And guys, just we have embassies in most countries in the world, not all. I don't know all the countries we don't have embassies in. I'm not sure if we have an embassy in North Korea. I don't think we do. But anyways, let me tell you the rules of embassies. Oh, and guys, when we have an embassy in that country, they have embassies in our country. So, for example, when I went to Bolivia, I had to go to the Bolivian embassy in LA and to get a visa. So I had to go to the Bolivian embassy to do that. So other countries have embassies here. Now let me tell you the rules of embassies. You don't touch people's embassies. Simple rule. You don't touch people's embassies. It doesn't matter if you're having problems with the country. It doesn't matter if you hate the country. You may hate the country, but if we have embassies, you respect their embassy. You don't touch them. That's a no-no. But when we allow the Shah into the United States, the Iranians become so furious with the United States. Just to give you an idea how furious they're burning the American flag, right? You're going to see that a lot in the Middle East. That they attack our embassy. They climb over the walls of the embassy, they break through the gates of the embassy, and they start taking Americans hostage. I forget how many prisoners they take hostage. I think they take the entire embassy hostage. They release the women. The women can go back to the United States, but they keep the men. I think they keep all the men. But look, they got a bunch of prisoners. They're hostages, guys. They got hostages. And the president at the time, it's not Ronald Reagan. It's not Ronald Reagan. It's a guy by the name of Jimmy Carter. But he couldn't. He launched an attack to get him out, but guys, that attack failed horribly. The helicopters crashed in the desert. And it was, guys, they held those American hostages for a long time. Now, this is called the Iranian hostage crisis. We'll talk more about it later. But that's the Iranian hostage crisis, okay? So what do we need to remember about this story so far? Okay, don't forget about Nicaragua. We're trying to get rid of the communists there. Okay, don't forget that. We're supporting the Contras. But the Contras are killing some people. You can't do that. So Congress cuts off money, but Ronald Reagan wants to find a way to get money for these guys. Okay, Ronald Reagan wants to find a way to get money without Congress knowing about it because Congress can't find out about it. So how are we going to do this? You can't just send guns over there because if America sends guns, Congress will find out about it. So here's Reagan's plan. By the way, by the time Reagan gets in office, there are Americans who've been hostage for, God, I think it's almost been a year. I forget how long they were hostages by this time. And then one day the Iranians just release them. They just release the hostages. Why? Because the United States sold Iran weapons. Ronald Reagan sold Iran weapons. Why? Why do we sell the Iranians weapons? Because they're in a war with their neighbor. Let me show you. It gets complicated, guys. I know there's a lot going on here. But look, Iran gets attacked by their neighbor, Iraq. These two countries, they get involved in a war, and Iran needs help badly. They need help. So what happens here is we're going to sell them weapons for two things. Okay, question coming up here, by the way. We're going to sell them weapons so that, number one, they release American hostages. Okay. And number two, that the money we get from them is going to go to the Contras. Okay. So two things we're going to get from this. We're going to sell weapons to the Iran so they can fight this war with Iraq, and we're going to use that money to send to the Contras, and Congress won't find out about it. That's the idea. Congress won't find out, and get the hostages out. And they release it. I mean, it works. They release the hostages. Reagan looks like a hero. It looks like he negotiated instead of what it was. By what it was is we paid. We gave kidnappers. We're dealing with terrorists. They kidnapped Americans, and we're basically buying their freedom. But let me show you the guy who ends up getting caught for this. Him. That's Oliver North. He's the one that's caught doing all this. So this is going to be called the Iran hostage scandal. And this question coming up here. I have to figure this. There's a bunch of questions coming up out of all this. Okay. He gets caught. He's the one who's making these deals and arranging everything. Look, most people believe that Reagan knew all about this. If you ask me my personal opinion, I think Reagan knew about all of it. I think Reagan ordered it. I find it ludicrous to believe that anyone in the American government was going to be selling weapons to Iran without very, very high authorization up in the government. But this guy claims it's all his fault. When we caught him, he could have he could have said Reagan told me to do it. He could have said that a bunch of people told him to do it. He wouldn't talk. He ends up going to jail. In case you're curious who these people are, that's the girl that helped him shred all the documents. Okay, she I think her name was Fawn Hall. I think it was Fawn Hall. I don't know, but she was his secretary, and she shredded everything. She shredded all those papers. I'll show you about this in a second. By the way, what we're going to see here in Iran, when Iran shifts, you're going to see the hijab. You're going to see. I don't think you see this in Iran as much as you see in other countries. There are some countries I've been to the Middle East where you're going to see a good percentage of women walking around with the burqa, but this is very, very traditional Islamic dress for women. Very, very traditional. I've seen, and this is going to be, bathing suits that you see today in countries like France or other countries where, well, what is a woman who wants to be, kind of religiously correct? What does she wear at the beach? She wears this. And there have been problems in Europe where, you have a lot of Muslim immigrants, and they're going into the beach like this, and in France in particular, this is, oh man, what's her name? I think it was Brigitte Bardot, if I remember correctly. I'm not so good, but she was this French actress that made the bikini very popular, and French society was very proud of women that were glamorous like Brigitte Bardot and the bikini. So when they see thousands of Islamic women going to the beach, there's some cultural clash there. But okay, all right. Anyways, probably unnecessary. Let's get back to the story. Okay. So that's what happens in Iran. Um, sorry, and that's how it's going to tie in with Nicaragua. So let's recap all this. All right. In the case of Nicaragua, you have a communist government. We want to overthrow it. We support the Contras. We support the Contras who start, a policy. Well, some people will call it terror, a policy of terror against the government in Nicaragua. Look, it's a dirty war. It's a dirty war. I don't know how you fight this war and keep your hands clean. Okay, it's one of the unfortunate circumstances of the Cold War, especially in Latin America. These are going to be ugly, ugly wars. Children being used as soldiers, murders being committed, thousands of people dying. Okay, when Congress finds out about how the Contras are fighting this war, they tell us we can't use weapons, we can't ship them assistance, we can't give them money or guns. Ronald Reagan, him and his smiling teeth, find a way to do it anyways, illegally, by the way, illegally with the Iran hostage crisis. Iran hostage scandal. That's what it's going to be called. actually called, sorry, the Iran-Contra scandal, not the hostage scandal, the Iran-Contra scandal. I apologize. And you need to know what that is too. That means we're going to sell weapons to a terrorist country that kidnapped our embassy personnel to get our hostages free and to use that money to fund the Contras. Okay, so that's the case in Nicaragua. And that's actually the longest part of the lecture. Explaining the situation in Iran is it takes some time. Now, the situation in El Salvador is different. It's the reverse. It's the opposite of Nicaragua. And the situation in El Salvador, what you're going to have is you're going to have an anti-communist government that is fighting communist rebels. Okay, so what we have here in El Salvador is a government that we like. I don't know if like is the right word, but look, they're not communists. So because they're not communists, they're allies. Okay, and the CIA and the US government support El Salvador. Why? Because they're fighting communists. Guys, let me tell you a little reality during the Cold War. All the government had to say in Latin America and any part of the world is we're fighting communists. And the United States was very eager to help in that battle. The United States is very, especially if the United States has an interest in the country, is very eager to start shipping in money and guns and American military personnel to help train the soldiers. Oh, and by the way, let me tell you about American military personnel going to train soldiers. The idea is that these are American advisors. We sent a lot of American advisors into, El Salvador. I will tell you this, into, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico. But guys, a lot of these advisors, they're training these guys to fight in war. And when time for war, when the time to go out and fight occurs, and you're going to read stories of a lot of these Americans going out into the jungle with these guys. Okay, they're going to go out into the jungle and they're going to fight alongside the guys that they trained. They're not supposed to, but it happens. Okay, so we like to say there's no Americans fighting in these battles. It's just not true. A lot of these guys want to fight with the guys they're training. They want to fight on their side. I get it. I understand it. But they're not supposed to be. I understand the impulse, but they're not supposed to be. Anyways, so what happens with El Salvador? We send in, the usual package: money, guns, military equipment, advisors. We do whatever it takes. The CIA gets in there and trains the government on how to fight the communists. And this becomes one of the controversial aspects of this war. You get, the death squads. You get the death squads, which are government soldiers, government organizations that go out and they track down anybody sympathetic to the communist, anybody who gives a positive word about the communists, and anybody who's critical of the government. Because if you're critical of the government, you must be a communist, and starts killing people. Okay, start killing them. You hear stories of Catholic priests being beheaded. You hear stories of, because why? Why would you behead a Catholic priest? Because a guy said something about the people suffering and, struggling under the government, and the government doesn't care. And when the government will interpret that as, well, that means you're supporting the communists, and kill this guy. To be honest, if you're a priest, you probably should be non-political about this, and especially if you're in El Salvador, if you want to keep your head, because you say the wrong thing and the death squads are coming. And guys, I've had it, I'll tell you one story from a kid who shared it with me. By the way, some of your parents came from El Salvador. They came during this time. Some of your grandparents came during this time. Ask them, did you come during the war? And maybe don't ask too many questions after that, because if the answer is yes, maybe they don't want to talk about it. And let me tell you why. I had one of my students, his father came. He came to this country when he was 12. Right? Let me ask a question about El Salvador before I share this question with you. This story with you. But he came when he was 12, And he said he was in his village when the death squads showed up, and you always knew when the death squads were coming because they rode these black like SUVs, like Land Rovers or something. They always came out in these black trucks, and they gathered all the men in the village up. And guys, this is a small village. I mean, like everybody's pretty much related, or they're very I mean, like these families have known each other for decades. So it's a small village, maybe like I don't know. He made it sound like it was about 100 people, 200 people, something like that. But they gathered all the men up, and they announced that they had evidence that the village was supporting the communist rebels, and they took these men. By the way, when I say men, you gotta understand, in Latin America, you know, an 11-year-old boy is a man at this time. A 10-year-old boy is a man at this time. And they gathered all these guys up and they shot them. They started firing into this group of men. And he was surrounded by his father, his uncle. This kid's dad was surrounded by his family, his neighbors, people he knew all his life. And he could hear people getting hit by these bullets and falling to the ground, and people screaming, and some people trying to run, but they only get maybe 4 or 5 steps before they're shot. And my student's father wasn't shot, but he fell down with everybody else because he thought it was the safest thing to do. If you didn't want to be dead, if you didn't want to get killed, sorry, that's a better way of saying it, then the best thing to do is play dead. And so he fell, and he was, the bodies of his uncles, his neighbors fell on top of him, you know. And when they were done, shooting all these people, they took out their pistols and started walking through the bodies looking for survivors, you know. And you hear these people still, groaning, or people moving, and just single pistol shots, bang, bang, bang. And these people were being executed, the ones that were still alive. And his father laid still, and he must have looked so convincingly dead that they didn't shoot him. And they got back into the trucks and drove off, and he waited long after they were gone because he thought it might have been a trick. Like, some people are still going to stick around and wait to see if anybody gets up and tries to walk away from it. But he waited till nighttime under the bodies of his family and friends, neighbors. Waited till nighttime and managed to escape. So this is the wars out here. And just so you guys know, it's not just, I mean, communists are doing this kind of stuff too. You'll read stories about communist massacres, communists assassinating government officials, communists assassinating anybody who supports the government. This is a brutal, ugly war. Ugly. How do you fight it? That might be a good debate. Do you become like your enemy when you're fighting someone that's a monster? Or maybe that's the only way you can fight these wars. I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. Anyways, that wraps up our lecture. Oh, these are some pictures from the death squad. I should have warned you. I apologize. I didn't warn you first. But I do want you to remember, though, that that was a great picture to come to after that. I do want you to remember that the war in these countries, it's not simple. And atrocities are committed by both sides. There's no one side that has a monopoly on evil in this war, if you want to use the word evil. Like I told you, the war in Latin America and in much of the Cold War, especially when there's guerrilla warfare going on. They're marked by brutality. And it's hard to keep your hands clean in a war like that. Anyways, guys, I hope this video is better. I'm gonna watch a video before I post it. Hopefully, the quality is better. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to record this again. But take care, guys, and I will see you on Zoom soon. Okay, see you later.